See, if Yeshua can exist in God's foreknowledge, then Abraham can exist in God's foreknowledge, which means that he was not before Abraham, since they both exist in God's foreknowledge at the same time, which would make them both equally old. Sami's position is even more absurd when we consider John 1 verse 30, when John the Baptist said, "This is he on behalf of whom I said, after me comes a man who has a higher rank than I, for he existed before me." From Luke 1 verse 36, we know that John the Baptist was born 6 months earlier than Yeshua. Yet John says that Yeshua existed before him. Clearly, this has nothing to do with any foreknowledge of anyone, because that would make John just as old as Yeshua, because he would exist in God's foreknowledge as well. The only logical answer to this is that this refers to the pre-existence of the Son of God. So Sami can quote Jeremiah 1 all he wants, but this has nothing to do with existing in God's foreknowledge. And neither does Jeremiah 1, by the way. All it says is that God knew of Jeremiah and had ordained certain things for Jeremiah. But this does not mean that Jeremiah existed in God's knowledge. That is the equivalent of the imaginary friend for extremely lonely people, you know. He exists, but he doesn't. Sami tries to pin that one on God because there is no other way around the problem that Yeshua refers to his pre-existence. So again, no one exists in God's foreknowledge. We are all known by God, but we don't exist with him. So we can't revert to any existence with God in his foreknowledge. If that was the case, we would all be eternal, because we all existed in God's foreknowledge from eternity past. Point number 30.
Secondly, he talks about Isaiah 53. Now, I want to spend 1 minute on this. Now, Isaiah 53, according to Christians, is clear. A virgin is going to give birth, and the person she gives birth to is God, according to them. It's so crystal clear. So why, when Mary gave birth to a virgin boy, as Isaiah said, why didn't she believe her son was God? Does it go together? Why did nobody believe he was God while he was alive? If someone's born of a virgin, and the Old Testament crystal clearly says it, as he says, then why didn't they just immediately believe it? He falls in line. His own mother didn't believe he was God. Why is that? It doesn't make sense if you think about it.
I really can't believe that Sami brings this up as a real argument against the deity of Yeshua. I'm sorry, but I can't help to express my amazement at the argumentation that is being put forth. Because Mary doesn't believe that Yeshua is God, it must not be foretold, and because she worries about him when he's missing at the age of 12, he can't be divine. Again, this does nothing than demonstrate how Muslims will throw anything out there, no matter how unappealing that argument is, in order to try to refute or to address anything that we say based on our texts. Let's tackle the last argument first. Sami claims that since Mary was worried about Yeshua, he can't be divine, because if she believed that he was divine, then why would she worry about him going missing, right? Because he is God, he can take care of himself. To say this is to accuse Mary of being a good parent. Any responsible and good parent would worry if his or her child would go missing at such a young age. But we can easily turn this around. Concerning the things that people believed about the Messiah, son of David, we can easily argue that she didn't believe that he was Messiah, because if she would believe he was Messiah, then, she wouldn't worry, because God would make all his promises come true anyway regarding the Messiah, right? So no matter how irresponsible she would behave towards the Messiah, God would make everything go well for him, right? So why would she worry about him? So the Islamic view that Yeshua is the Messiah is false, because Mary was a religious lady, right? She wasn't your average Samantha, as Sami puts it. See how futile this argument is? To think that Mary can't worry about the Messiah when he goes missing is to urge her to be a bad and irresponsible parent. you might as well sit back and not feed or nurture the child, because God will make his promise come to pass about the Messiah no matter what. This kind of reasoning can be stretched as far as one wants, but it remains ridiculous. Now to the prophecy of Isaiah that Dr. White brought up in the debate. According to Sami, the fact that Mary didn't believe that the Messiah was to be divine proves that there was no such prophecy in the Tanakh, because since Mary was a religious lady, she would have known about those prophecies. First, this would imply that Mary wasn't able to misunderstand the text of the Tanakh. Furthermore, in the Gospels, Mary often misunderstands the ministry of Yeshua. A couple of examples to illustrate this. In Luke 2, verses 41 through 49, the same passage that Sami uses, this failure to understand him is apparent. Yeshua goes missing and Mary and Joseph go back to Jerusalem to find him. When they finally do find him, Mary tells him that they are worried about him. Now look at his response and what the text said. "Now, why were you searching for me?" he asked. "Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?" Now look at this. But they did not understand what he was saying to them. Look at this. When Mary got the visit from Gabriel, Gabriel told her that the child she would give birth to would be called the Son of the Most High, the Son of God. Not once, but twice Gabriel told her that. You can see this in Luke 1:32 and 35. Yet when Yeshua tells her that he was to be in his Father's house, she didn't understand it, and she didn't know what he was talking about. Another example we find in Mark 6. When Yeshua is teaching on the Shabbat, people started to take offense to him. After they mentioned the family of Yeshua, including Mary, Yeshua responds with the following words in verse 4. Jesus said to them, "Only in his hometown, among his relatives, and in his own house is a prophet without honor." This again shows how Mary and her house misunderstood the ministry of Yeshua. It is only later, after his resurrection, she was aware of what was supposed to happen and what actually happened. So Sami's argument holds no weight whatsoever. We can argue that since Mary didn't understand that he was to be called the Son of God, Gabriel never told her, right? This argument is only appealing to those who are either unaware of the testimony of Scripture or those who have no interest to let the Scriptures speak for itself and dismiss whatever they don't like and utilize what they do like. Obviously, that is not the correct method to do exegesis. Point number 31.
Then he says the clay birds are from the Gnostic stories. Actually, no, they're not. Yes, there are similarities, but the Gnostics have the wrong version. The Quran, there is a bit of truth in the Gnostics, but they mixed it up. Do you know in the Gnostics, Jesus actually kills other children? Where is this in the Quran? Number two, your own colleague David Wood said the Prophet Muhammad is sincere. So if the Prophet Muhammad is sincere, he would have copied the stories from the Gnostics word for word. Why did he change it? You can't have it two ways. If he's sincere, he would take the story from the Gnostics word for word. But he didn't. You can't have it both ways. So no,
Time,
the Quranic
please.
story doesn't come from the
Time.
Gnostics. Go read the Gnostic and then go read the Quran. The
Sami.
Gnostic has some
Sami.
truth in it,
Time, please.
just like the Bible.
I just had to chuckle at this one. According to Sami, the Gnostics have the wrong version, and there is a bit of truth in the Gnostic sources of the clay bird story. Actually, nothing in the Gnostic versions is deemed historically accurate. It's a fairy tale, Sami. It never happened. And that's the case with a lot of things in the Quran, where the author of that book gets stories from all kinds of rip-offs of the originals. So what if the Gnostic story of the clay birds has Yeshua kill other people? The Quran always cleans up its stories anyway. See, one of the main habits of the Quran is that it gives the impression that the prophets don't sin. It always removes the errors that we find in the original stories when it plagiarizes from whatever source it plagiarizes from.